Did you guys see that? I just had a working intro video. So I feel like everyone needs to take note of what just happened. Michael, I know you saw that, so please tell your friends that I did things. Somebody tell Jenny and Kevin that I can do things. It only took me way longer. We won't get into that. So my guest is having struggles getting on in true what could go wrong fashion. And I don't know how to fix it. So that's a bummer. So if anybody out there is like, hey, I can solve your problems for you so that your guest can get on, feel free to jump in and solve my problems for me. That'd be great. Thanks. That's what you people are for. So we're supposed to be talking about, actually, this is exactly what happened last time we tried to talk about this topic. So I don't know what it is, if it's the topic or like, um, hang on. Talk about what could go wrong with this. What could go wrong with this is my guest isn't getting on because it's not working. However, we did figure out time zones, which was also a really big struggle. But Pavla was going to come and hang out with me. She's really amazing, and one day we will get this to work. So if you don't already follow her, you should. She's in education and all those amazing things. So, like I did last time, I will just take a minute to rant about things for all of you lovely people who are here to hang out with me because I know that's why you're here. Okay. So, we're talking about if children can define their own version of success. Okay. And I posted a poll about this a couple minutes ago. Like, are children, or can children, are they too young to define their own version of success? And it's going interestingly. There's some people that are like, no, they absolutely can define their own version of success. And then there's other people who are like, absolutely not. Children are way too young to define their own version of success. So if you're here and hanging out with me now, I'd love to hear kind of your thoughts on that. What do you think? Is it a thing for children to be able to define their own version of success? And what I mean by that is, can they be a part of the conversation of, this is what it feels like for me to be successful? Maybe that's getting straight A's. Maybe that's what feels like success for them. Maybe it's getting a B plus. If we're just talking about grades, and if you've been here, you know how I feel about grades. So I know that's a bad comment, a bad analogy for me, but that's fine. Okay, so they get to define what that success looks like for them. Can they do that? Is that a healthy thing for them to do, or will they just ruin their lives? Okay. Alternatively, the other thing would be like, do we set their success for them? We say, you have to get A's every single time. Anything below that is unsuccessful. So what are your thoughts here? Like, can a child come in and help to define their own versions of success? Michael says, yes, they can with limits. What would those limits look like? What does that mean? Tell me more words. Use more words, Michael. Either they do it as children or they spend years in therapy later. This is an interesting statement. I'd love to hear more on what you think on like how those two things correlate. In my mind, I'm thinking those two things correlate because if they're only being given what success looks like from external people, then they're also getting boundaries and success concepts from external people. So they're not really being taught to know themselves, understand what it feels like for them, what feels good, what feels bad, kind of what to follow. And that level of awareness and emotional intelligence, those types of things dwindle if they're not being sparked in the child. That's my theory, but I'd like to hear more about what you mean by that. Michael says you have to know the child. So when you say limits, Michael, are you kind of talking about like coming alongside them and co-constructing with them? And if when you're doing that, then that's much easier when you know the child, when you have an understanding of who they are and what they do and that type of thing. Exactly. Okay, cool. So we're on the same wavelength, right? Hang on, let me tell Pavla. I don't know. I've never had this problem before. So she's in some other space on Restream, out in the Restream world, and I'm right here, and we can't get in the same place. So any Restream experts out there who know how to solve this problem, that'd be great. Thanks. Okay. All right. So I think then let's go to into. So we've generally concluded that we can allow the child some autonomy in creating their own version of success, right? Can we agree that that's a general understanding that we have? So then my next question is, if we're going to co-construct with that child, what does that look like? And I think Michael actually has kind of an answer to that already before I even ask the question, because we're like one mind. All you people are like one mind with me here. So some children need more leadership and some can pick their path. I think that's absolutely true. I disagree in that there's a child that would need like complete like all of their ability to make decisions for themselves and kind of speak into what success feels like or the directions they want to go is taken from them, and an adult is deciding that for them. I disagree that that's, I guess in very rare cases, possibly, I don't know, but I disagree that that's really the way to go with that. I do agree that some children need more leadership, and a lot of that comes down to neurodiversity, right? If a child has lower executive functioning skills or has different thought processing patterns, those types of things, they might need someone to come alongside them and help ask guiding questions to get them from one place to another. Then there's other students who can see like 10 steps ahead of them, or they have more self-awareness. So I think you're right, Michael. It really depends on kind of the student, where they are in their path, their level of self-awareness, the way that they process information, neural pathways that have already been built. Like there's so many variables inside of that. But I think overall, what it means is we're coming alongside the learner as an adult, as whatever version of an adult we are in their life, parent, educator, whatever, and guiding them. But more than just saying you need to get here, it's asking them, poking questions. I call them clarifying questions, and the people closest to me get really annoyed with my clarifying questions. But I also get paid to ask clarifying questions when I'm doing coaching and strategy stuff. So it goes either way. But it's more of helping them to reflect on, how did that feel for you? And if you were to do that again, what would it look like? And those types of things, right? And helping them to reflect on their experiences, understand how they feel in alignment with them, and then think about how they want to incorporate those type of experiences in their future as they take on new things. And look, same wavelength again. Parents should expose children to diverse experiences. Agreed. As much as possible, allowing them to experience things outside of their norm, right? Those diverse things. And I think part of one of the kind of cool things of the COVID shutdown was, for us, my daughter, my oldest, got to go to an international school. It was online, and it was students from all over the world that came on and did these courses with her, right? So she got to hang out with people from Turkey and people from Spain and people from the UK and just all over. And she got to be introduced to people who have completely different ways of life. Like they'd be sitting around talking about what dinner time looked like at their house. And because they were all international, everything looked completely different. And the cool thing about those types of things is, while there's so much value in the local school or doing things within your community, right? You'll never, for me, I went to school in one place for a long time. And then I taught when I was older in one place for a long time. So I had a very closed experience of what the world looked like, and customs and norms and whatever, besides when I lived in Honduras. But for the most part, when students are going to school at their local school, they're getting one experience, and we may bring in other experiences for them to try, but it can be very challenging because they're living inside of this bubble of whatever the world around them looks like. So what does it look like to bring in these experiences to them? Because when the more that they're exposed to diverse experiences, like you're saying, the more information they have to help make decisions in the future. And, the more data that goes in, the better data that comes out. So providing those types of experiences for learners as parents or as educators is always a great tool to help them make better decisions and allow them to reflect on that. Let's see. Natalie says, metacognition and self-assessment are the most important learning outcomes of school today. I agree. I mean, there is power in reflective practices, right? The ability to reflect on things. I say a lot to my girls, like, there are no good experiences or bad experiences. There are just experiences. And it's what you do from that point. There are experiences that feel bad. There are experiences that feel good. But either way, you then get to decide what that looks like for you in the future, how you're choosing to use that for the next step, and how you're going to reflect on that and move forward. So I'd actually love to hear from the people who are here, like, what are some of your favorite clarifying questions, I guess, to ask? If you have yourself, or if you have a young person in your life, like, what would be a question that you would ask that person or yourself to help you think through something that happened as you're reflecting on it? I don't know. So for me, because a lot of what I've done over the past 10 months for myself is really figure out what my core values are. And that way I can make decisions that align with my core values. So if something happens, an experience or decision, then I can bring it back to who I am. Does this align with my core value? Does this make me feel valued and satisfied and loved and whatever? And then kind of reflect on it from there. So I'm always kind of bringing it back to my alignment. Does it meet me with who I am right here in my alignment? But what are some questions that you ask yourself, or that you ask the people around you? Again, I'm apologizing to Pavla because I don't know how to fix this problem. Ugh. Okay. Well, I can't get Pavla here because I don't know how to work Restream. But I think overall, it's been a successful 15 minutes. We know that, yes, learners can be engaged in defining what success looks like for them. We've kind of agreed that coming at them as the adult and asking them guiding questions and walking them through reflective practices to get to that point. It doesn't really look like just throwing them the reins and saying, figure your life out and I'll see you in 10 years. It's more helping them build it on their own, but not taking that autonomy from them and giving a lot of it back, and just co-constructing with them. Like I talk about all the time in other episodes that I do, is like, you're coming alongside them and you're building something with them, not for them. So that would be the differentiator for me when it comes to helping learners create their own success. So the answer to the question that I asked is, are learners too young to create their own success, or to define their own success, is no. It was a trick question. It was always no. Ooh, Natalie, I don't know how to click on that. All right. My 3 go-to reflection questions I use with students are, what are you most proud of? I like that. What do you think could be stronger? And what will you do differently next time? Ooh, I love those. I especially love the question of, what will you do differently next time? And I love to ask that question at a time when the learner feels like they've had a really successful experience. So they're like, this was great. This was perfect. This was awesome. I loved everything about it. I feel good. It aligned with who I am. And then still asking that question, like, that's amazing. What would you do differently next time? And allowing them to still kind of come back to there are many different paths to success. So even though you were successful in this and that felt really good, you could be successful in another way, right? So I think that is an interesting question that you could ask at varying points, not just when it was a failure, but even when it was a success. And I like, what are you most proud of? Because it almost it makes them pick one thing. And this would be great so flip it, right? You think you'll ask this in a situation where they're proud. Then they have to define, what are you most proud of? There may have been 7 things that happened, but you have to kind of pick one and filter the other things out. Then asking it in a situation where they may have failed could be another thought exercise to walk them through. So if they were going for one outcome and missed that and got a different outcome, or didn't get an outcome at all that they really were going for, then that question is a great question to ask. What are you most proud of? Because most often, like when I run through this thought practice exercise with my learners or with my children, they're like, nothing. I'm not proud of anything that just happened. Everything that happened was not what I wanted, so I'm proud of nothing. So not an answer. Pick another one. And they have to go back and reflect on, you know what, I am proud of the challenge that I took on, or I'm proud of finding the information that I needed to find to get to this point, or I'm proud of the way that I regulated my emotions, or I'm proud of the way that I came to you for co-regulation of my emotions. Like, I'm proud of what? Because there's still an action that you took to get you as far as you got. So I think I love these questions, and I think taking these questions and like flipping them and using them in the opposite times that you think you would use them is always really fun, and it'll frustrate the learners around you. So that's exciting. But thank you, Natalie, for sharing those questions. I really love those. So I'm going to jump off because, I don't have a guest, and I feel like we've covered some great topics in this 20 minutes. So thank you so much for hanging out with me, for real. If you haven't done the poll that I had up about if children can define their own success, definitely go back and vote on that poll and leave some comments about what you think that means. I love this conversation. I love having this conversation. So please join in. Oop. All right, let's see. Sometimes it's about providing non-judgment space and time. Some questions may have preconceived acceptable answers. Oh, I love that. Y'all are like my best friends. This is so accurate, right? It's about creating that psychological safety for the people around you to allow them to bring back those answers. So when you ask a question, the next part of that is creating a safe space for them to answer. So when I was in the classroom, and now when I do coaching for individuals or strategy with companies, those types of things, the biggest part of my role, I feel like, is the space that I create for the people that I'm working with to bring their actual real life answers and know that this is a judgment-free zone, and this is a safe space. This is somewhere that you can bring your actual feelings and emotions to, and not have to apologize for those. And I think that's a really important thing. And sometimes, like you said, the time to be able to answer a question, you need time to reflect on that. It may not just happen instantly. You may have several times of asking reflective questions before you're able to walk that learner through getting to an answer. And I think this last part about some questions may have preconceived acceptable answers is so true. And my question, a lot of times, if I ask a question that has a very typical answer and I get that typical answer, then I would go back to asking, like, does that feel like your answer, or is that an answer that you've heard from other places? Like, tell me why that's your answer. So almost like prove it. Are you just kind of parroting back answers that you've heard from somewhere else? And if so, or if you're saying that that's true for yourself, I want you to prove it. So I think that's always an interesting train of, cool, now that you've given that answer, tell me why. And that's usually the point where you can really see, is that an answer that they're giving that really aligns or resonates with them? Or is that an answer that is a preconceived acceptable answer, like you were saying? Where does that fall? And if they're not able to like prove it or back it up or defend it with some kind of vigor, then most likely they're just parroting an answer that they've heard from somewhere else. So I love that. You guys all need to be my best friends because you make the best statements and ask the best questions. Michael says, get your guests to use Twitch, maybe. That sounds hard. Like, I already tried to figure this out. Obviously, this isn't working. I've never had this problem before, so I don't know what this problem is. And I feel really bad because we had other issues last time Pavla tried to join, and I really wanted to have a conversation with her, so I'm going to have to work that out. Are you telling me what I want to hear? Yeah. Is that a question that you're asking me or a question that you would ask the child? And yeah, I think that's a good question because they can assume the answer that you want. I think that's another part of creating that safe space is not laying out the acceptable answers, but rather through repeated conversations, you're showing them that you're looking for their answer, not the answer that they think you want them to have. That one. Why can be a trigger. Yeah, I'm assuming you're talking about when I'm asking them to like prove it. If that's your answer, then why is that your answer? Prove it. And there have been, if that's what you're talking about, there have been times where I've had that type of conversation. They're like, I don't need to prove it to you. Like, I already told you my answer. You asked me to tell you my answer. I told you my answer. Okay. But it can be a good question if they dive into that with you. Ooh, we have a ghost. LinkedIn user. When you give a child the room to think of their own answers, you are giving them room to develop and be creative. The most empowered children I've seen are the ones that have been given the opportunity to work out their own decisions and answers to a great extent. I agree. Who are you? I want to see who you are. Who is my LinkedIn ghost? I love your comment. Raksha. I'm so sorry if I'm mutilating how you say that. But yes, I agree. And that comes back to creating that psychological safety, right? How are we creating that space for them to answer, the time to answer, the ability to be creative in an answer and not feel like they're going to be judged in their response? And over time, when I've done this, it seems like at the beginning of the conversation, the answers are kind of vanilla. Like they're a little bit of an answer, maybe a little bit of what they think you want to hear, and maybe a little bit of their creativity. And the more that you have this conversation and like celebrate their creativity and their answers and the way that they're going with that, the more and more and more creative that they get. And you're right, you're empowering them to allow these thoughts to happen in their brain, like to think in ways outside of what would typically be their typical thought processes, right? Or what they feel like you would call success. So if you take it all the way back, you're allowing them to define their own success in whatever that experience was. And when they reflect on it, they're able to do the same thing. They're able to kind of go back and say, can I express this to you from an empowered place? Am I in a safe place? Do I have a sense of belonging? So allowing them to create their own success, I think, is very similar to creating that space of psychological safety, because it does ask a lot of them. They're having to jump off a cliff, right, and be unique in what they want as an end game, as an end result, when it may be different from what other people have said that they should want. And so that can be really hard. And so I think it is so, so important to consistently empower this child or the learner or, you or me or an adult or whoever is looking to create their own success, because they're going to come against pushback and they're going to come against people saying, oh, it should have looked like this, or it should have looked like that, or you should have done this or whatever. And they have to be able to stand from that empowered place. And I loved what you said at the end about the empowered children that you've seen are the ones that have been given the opportunity to work out their own decisions and answers to a great extent, right? That's back to what we were discussing at the beginning of how are we co-constructing this with them, not just throwing it at them and saying, you're on your own, figure it out, but also not fully taking that from them and saying it has to look like this, and here's the exact tools you need to build it, but rather giving them a process. So as an example, when I was directing the last school I was at, we were a Reggio Emilia type school. And what that meant for us was we valued process over product. So when I first came, they were doing a different type of curriculum where the child saw the end product. So say the end product was to build a ladybug. Okay, so the teacher would hold up, okay, here's what our ladybug's going to look like. Here is the wing, here is the antenna, here is that, and here's all the pieces, make exactly this. And then the kids would go through. If they put the wing in crooked, the teacher would come back and help them straighten it. So at the end, they all got the same ladybugs. Okay, so to take that project and to throw it into a Reggio Emilia style, what you're doing is you're saying, hey, let's create a ladybug. And you might show them different pictures of a ladybug. You might show them a video. You might show them a cartoon of a ladybug. You might read the Grouchy Ladybug. You might watch a video on YouTube of a ladybug. You might look at an actual picture of a ladybug, but you're not showing them what they're going to make at the end. They're giving them the pieces to kind of build that picture in their brain. And then depending on the age, you can give them the pieces that they'll need. So already the pre-cut out pieces, and let them put them together in whatever they feel like. That might be the learner that we were talking about at the beginning, where they need less leadership, right? Or versus the learner that needs more leadership. So the learner that may have neurodivergence or might just be younger, you might give them all the pre-cut out pieces to the ladybug to get to that. Then the older kids, you're giving them red and black paper and scissors and saying, okay, create your ladybug. And we're focusing on the process of it. We're focusing on how are you intaking this information? What are you doing with the information that you're bringing in? Are you able, when you look at the ladybug, to then go get red and black paper? Are you then able to understand that it's probably going to be a circle? Are you able to put those dots on it, right? So you're looking at the process, not it needs to look exactly like this when it's done. And I think that's very similar to that co-constructivism, coming alongside the learner and helping them create their own version of success of that ladybug. And it's really cool to see that happen in the classroom, because that freedom that the learners get when they know that they're in a safe space, and the really cool versions of these projects that you'll get, way cooler than anything you could have created for them. So that's kind of where I come from on all of this, is I can create an ending for a child of what I feel like, what it should look like for them in the end. But how much cooler could it be if they created something from their own imagination and then did the work to get there? I want to see where we're going to be when all these learners start doing what really feels aligned with them and is creating a success for them. So I think learners and children can create their own success, and they can define their own success while working with the adults around them. And I think we can be the adults that empower them to do that. So thank you for hanging out with me. I apologize that Pavla wasn't here. I really wish that she was. But I will see you guys. Ooh, I'm doing a special What Could Go Wrong live on Friday. So be sure to kind of follow up and see that happen on Friday. So hopefully that one goes better. See you guys next